preclinicals, I think oftentimes, the way in which, medical education is structured can feel infantilizing. Like, oh, you don't really know anything yet, and for good reason. And we're here to teach you, all these skills. But I think that can be a difficult mental transition for folks to make, especially if they have taken a non-traditional route or been involved with, big scale operations or had just a whole nother graduate degree like yourself.
Welcome to the Physician-Pharmacist podcast, a show designed to shed some light on a very unusual pathway into medicine. I'm your host, Nathan Gartland, and I'm a licensed pharmacist and fourth-year medical student. I'm also the author of PharmD to MD and the owner of the Physician-Pharmacist Company. As this podcast has grown, we've had the tremendous opportunity to broaden our scope and explore other non-traditional healthcare careers. Tune in to hear from our non-traditional experts serving at the frontier of medicine, technology, and innovation. Dr. Lathan Liou is a MS2 at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, where he also works as a computational genomics researcher. Before starting medical school, he received his master's in epidemiology from the University of Cambridge. His tenure at the Biostatistics Unit at Cambridge was marked by groundbreaking contributions, including the development of software and algorithms that revolutionized hypothesis testing methodologies. Transitioning to Merck as a data scientist, Lathan spearheaded cross-company initiatives to enhance drug discovery through computational scaling, earning him accolades such as the MRL Collaboration Award and recognition for outstanding performance. He is currently pursuing his medical degree, and he tries to focus on actionable research along with integrations of bioinformatics into clinical practice. In his free time, he actively serves as co-chair of the MD Plus community, which is a nationwide community of physician-innovators. All righty. Well, welcome to the podcast today. Really happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nathan. Really glad to be here.
Excellent. And so to start things off, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you did prior to going to undergrad?
Sure. So I was born in New York. I was born in Queens, but I grew up entirely in New Jersey, so just across the Hudson. And then I decided that I guess I didn't want to be on the East Coast anymore. So I did my undergrad at Pomona College out in Southern California.
Wow.
And there I ended up studying molecular biology and statistics. And then, it was around I would say, I think it was sophomore or end of sophomore year of undergrad that I was lucky enough to get accepted into the FlexMed program at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And just I guess for you and all the listeners, FlexMed is basically this early assurance program where you don't have to take the MCAT if you get accepted. So I was really lucky to get that because that freed up a whole bunch of time, and I was basically able to leverage that time to fully dive into statistics. And I ended up liking it so much that I wanted to continue to deepen my expertise and my knowledge. So I pursued a master's in epidemiology at Cambridge University over in England. And then I stayed a bit in England after I completed the degree just to work as a statistician. And then pretty soon after, I started a new job, a new role as a data scientist at Merck. So I moved back to the US, to Boston. And I was there doing a lot of computational genomics, a lot of bioinformatics stuff, scaling drug discovery platforms. And did that for almost 2 years. And then that pretty much brought me to medical school.
Wow. I mean, how did you know that you wanted to do something related to like the bioinformatics field? Like, for instance, as myself, like I barely knew I wanted to do pharmacy at the time, and you knew you wanted to do molecular biology and biostatistics. Like, how did you come across that initially?
Yeah. So I think if I reflect on that, I think the truth is I started with molecular biology just because going into my first year of undergrad, it seemed just like a natural way to organize my coursework. Like I knew I was interested in medicine, and I knew that at some point I had to take Bio 101 or whatever, intro biology, intro chemistry. And it just so happened that, a lot of these like core courses that a lot of pre-meds take also were the core like credit requirements
Mm.
for molecular biology. So I started with that. I would say like how I got interested in statistics. I really have to give credit um, to the first statistics professor I ever had, Professor Joe Harden. She made stats seem so intuitive and so fun because I took AP stats in high school and I like did not do well on that AP stats exam. Like that was I didn't even submit that to colleges. That was my lowest score. So I was like, oh yeah, math and stats, that's like a done deal. Like I'm not doing any more of that. Um, but no, my first stats class in college really changed my perspective um, as to how like you could use statistics and how you can gain insights from data. And that was really an empowering feeling. So I think from pretty much from that moment, I was pretty hooked and I wanted to, get more and more experience. So I ended up, doing a couple of research projects at Pomona, but I also, sought out external opportunities at other institutions. So that pretty much anchored, the rest of my undergrad time.
Wow. And then do you think like using and having this experience with statistics was very useful in making you competitive for this FlexMed program?
Yeah, I think yeah, I think reflecting back on it, so when I put together my application for FlexMed, I actually framed it more as that I was like a public health oriented
Mhm.
applicant because at the time, so this was, yeah, like sophomore year that I was putting together this FlexMed application. That's when students are eligible. Um,
Mhm.
I was still learning, a lot of the basics of statistics. I was still, you know, gaining my mathematical foundation. So I don't think I was very good at statistics. I didn't really, I hadn't really been using it for a long time. But I think I framed my application as, I was doing, a lot of like public health work at the time as well. Really briefly, I was primarily involved in two pursuits. One was I was leading this nonprofit that did a lot of public health empowerment work
Mhm.
in these informal settlements in Bolivia. And then I was also working as a health advocate, so someone who tries to advocate on behalf of patients to gain access to resources, housing, food assistance, calling insurance companies on their behalf. So I also did that for sort of the Inland Empire patient population around LA. Um, and the whole time, like I was very much oriented towards like thinking about social determinants of health, thinking about like how these upstream, risk factors were basically contributing to um, worse health outcomes. So in a sense, like I was already thinking, like a statsy type person, a quantitative person. Like, okay, like I'm observing, this phenomenon. How do we quantify that so that we can better understand like what are the levers that we can push and pull to ultimately improve healthcare outcomes and healthcare delivery. So I would say getting that conceptual framework by being on the ground and doing public health work, I think was a really natural framing for, ultimately my quantitative skill set.
Wow. And so I take it that this experience also kind of like your work with the nonprofit organizations kind of led you down this pathway of considering going and doing epidemiology at Cambridge. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you pretty much nailed that one, Nathan. I think that really was like a big factor in me deciding to pursue additional training. I think I remember in my application that I cited a lot of this public health work as this catalyst for me wanting to better equip myself with the quantitative tools necessary to turn these observations into actionable insights, to use data to figure out how we could best allocate resources and time and energy to begin to address some of these systemic issues that I was seeing.
Wow. And so I think that's incredible what you're obviously doing with that and like using this like big data. Like, and it's, I think a lot of like healthcare professionals are, I think, apprehensive to get involved into this space because it's not like you said, it's very overwhelming with all the numbers and all the stuff. Like I
Hmm.
was not a great statistician with all the classes that I took throughout the time period. But once you've like gotten that initial exposure, you have good mentorship down that pathway, it's like learning a different language. Once you know it and understand
Mm.
it, it's so much easier to kind of comprehend. And then you can see the scale at which you can basically impact change. And it sounds like you found that as well, which I think is awesome. And so you're at Cambridge at this point, and you end up staying after your master's to do work basically in the biostatistics unit. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit more about like what your role was in that experience?
Yeah, yeah, sure thing. Um, so, um, yeah, so pretty much at this point, so just to contextualize the timing of it all, so I finished my master's right at the height of the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was a lot of there's a lot of uncertainty, of course, just across the board for everybody, and how it impacted me, how that uncertainty impacted me was, you know, at the time, I basically had this decision to make, which was, do I um, cash in on this FlexVet acceptance and matriculate, you know, in 2020, or do I, you know, kind of use this time to continue deepening, you know, my experience in a more hands-on way? Because I've been taking all these classes, you know, in undergrad and then in a master's, and I thought to myself, you know, I haven't really gotten a ton of industry level experience working as a quantitative professional. So what ended up happening was, you know, during the COVID pandemic, they had a hiring freeze on pretty much everything, just because no one knew what was going on. And I basically reached out to my professors at Cambridge, and I was asking if they had any available opportunities, available positions, and then one of them, he linked me to one of his colleagues who was a statistician at the Biostatistics Unit at Cambridge. That's like one of their main, you know, statistics departments. And then I pretty much got a position shortly after, you know, went through the technical interview and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So in this role, it was quite math heavy actually. So the particular research problem that we were thinking about was this idea of how do we better control false discovery rates. So as like a quick primer, just you know, for everyone listening. So this idea of like false discovery is, you know, when you do a statistical test and you know, there's like a certain threshold um, below which you claim something is statistically significant,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that it's unlikely that, you know, this observation occurred by chance, um, and then you action upon that statistical conclusion. But what ends up happening is that, you know, if you just work out the math, there is going to be a probability where the more tests that you do, the higher the chances that you conclude something is significant when it in fact really isn't. So, you know, for decades, there have been tons of statisticians working on methodology to attempt to control and rein in, you know, this um, probability that only increases the more tests that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I was working with my boss on a set of algorithms and also software that we could roll out to, you know, the public, companies, researchers, that would enable people to control this quantity, this false discovery rate, in such a way that um, we can guarantee control of this metric under a certain threshold, not only with the experiments on hand, but also given past experiments and also future experiments. So this was meant to be a guaranteed control across like I don't know if you're like a big like Marvel fan or but like if there's like a central timeline, it like controls it across that central timeline. So
Wow.
that was like the the big picture. Um, so my role was doing a lot of proofs, a lot of these like mathematical proofs, coding up the software, coding up these algorithms so that they run quickly, making the software user friendly, things like that.
Wow. So it's kind of like the intersection of all this technical mathematics on top of integration into software. So like computer coding, that kind of like making these formulas work inside of like the system that you're trying to build. And on top of that, inputting like the healthcare aspect of it, like the impact that this application can have. So that's incredible. And so with this experience, you obviously had a lot of takeaways. How did you pivot like all your roles and the things that you learned from that environment into your opportunities at Merck?
Yeah. So yeah, it was around towards the tail end of my role at Cambridge since I was on a limited contract, but I also figured too that it was kind of the right time for me to gain more experience within industry. So also just to take a step back to that initial like decision between medical school and pursuing industry experience. So I just wanted to shout out that Mount Sinai was so accommodating that they enabled me to take basically like X years off, so long as I just kept them in the loop as to what I was up to and to reaffirm my commitment to eventually practicing medicine. So I think that flexibility was key.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, I think when I was looking for roles, I really tried to pitch this version or this kind of ideal candidate for the job as someone who not only understood the technical aspects, the mathematics, the statistics, the computer coding at a decently high level, but also someone who's been on the ground and seen impact on real people, and I kind of wanted to mold those two areas together and present that to the roles I was applying for as like, hey, look, I have these quantitative skills like X, Y, and Z, but I also want to show you guys that I can see the tangible impacts of these decisions that we make as data people. Um, so then fast forward a little bit to when I started working at Merck. I think a lot of what I had done previously um, in epidemiology, in math, hardcore statistics, and computer engineering, like coding, that all like came into play when I was basically tasked with a couple of main initiatives to build out and scale Merck's drug discovery platforms. And it was basically through these initiatives that I got to really incorporate all the skills that I had gained up to that point, to like think critically about what were the pain points in the drug discovery pipeline, where could data science have the biggest impact in reducing costs, reducing time, reducing operational bottlenecks, and how could we basically maximize the ability of Merck and the scientists there to do what they came to do, which was to innovate and find good drug therapeutics.
Wow. I think that's incredible. And two things to add to that. First off, shout out to Mount Sinai for allowing you
Yeah,
to kind of like, they said, hey, you have this acceptance and we're going to hold this, quote unquote, indefinitely or whatever the timeline was. And they just said, go and figure out what you want to do, explore the
yeah,
world a little bit. I think that's really cool that they gave you that
right,
opportunity. And
yeah,
secondly, as a pharmacist myself, like I think like it's like near and dear to my heart, like, the drug discovery application too, because I love like the pharmaceutics behind it, all like the behind the scenes things that people don't necessarily think about. So it's really cool that you were able to look at this timeline from like, the first, molecule that they found, isolated, whatnot, all the way to like, distribution to patients. And you went in with big data and said, where can we find these little holes that we can improve the process and obviously allow physicians and clinicians and researchers to kind of have the most impact. So I think that's really cool. That's really cool that you were able to do that. And how long were you at Merck for this?
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that. So I was there at Merck for almost 2 years.
Wow. So, and you, like you said, you had that open timeline. So I'm going to get as much experience and exposure as possible for this opportunity. And
Yeah,
so after you had been there for a little bit of time, what kind of prompted you that this is time to go back to medical school?
yeah. So yeah, that's a great question. So medicine or pursuing a medical career was always on my mind. I would say pretty much from when I entered undergrad, and that was one of the reasons I applied to FlexMed, and wanted to have the option of pursuing medicine. And I think basically my thought process was towards the I would say towards the tail end of my tenure at Merck, I began to think a lot more critically about where I could have the most impact as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that decision making process was definitely tough, and I definitely charted it out many times in many different ways, and I tried to self interrogate, ask my friends and mentors for advice. But pretty much where I landed was um, being able to or having that knowledge and that experience of treating patients face to face, gaining that clinical knowledge, I thought was really key in terms of me, um, uh, in terms of me being able to be in that position that I foresee, maybe 10, 20 years out. And I thought it was key because um, I felt like I really needed to understand the individual impact, because when we talk about like big data, we often talk about like population, or like, so basically like with statistics, like statistics is all about estimating that population parameter. Like what is the population mean of this? What is the population prevalence of this?
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing I think for people working in data to realize is that when someone's in front of you, they're not just a data point, right? They have all these things that make them who they are, that make them human, that make them want to thrive and to live a good life. And I think that perspective was really key for me to consider that pivot into medicine. And I think there have been lots of moments throughout my early career that I had the opportunity to interact with people in that way. From my work as a health advocate, um, to my work, teaching public health workshops in Bolivia. I think all these things, kind of contributed to my sense that, I really needed that clinical exposure. I really needed that ability to care for people in an intimate way, and that would make me a better equipped person to, when we lead large scale initiatives, and we talk about, data driven medicine. I think that would make me better informed to push those initiatives out and to um, lead these projects, knowing who it's all for at the end of the day. So I think because of all those things, um, I realized that for me to have the biggest impact in the space that I foresee myself being, it was to be a physician, to have that physician skill set, um, but also, integrate my background as an epidemiologist, as someone who's, worked in industry and big pharma, um, and have that understanding of how large scale initiatives can take place to move the needle on healthcare.
Wow, I think that's incredible. And you're exactly what healthcare needs in the sense that you're a hybrid between the two professions where sometimes big data, and this, like the example I'll use might be like EMR, creation, where we have all these very technical individuals who don't understand how medical practice actually operates. And we have the physicians who are trying to make recommendations who don't understand how difficult it is to make those different integrations. So it
Right.
sounds like you're combining both of those things and having one foot in one door, one foot in the other, and it's going to make you like the best clinician out there possible. So I'm really excited to see where things take you with that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was really well put, by the way.
Thanks. And so, kind of reflecting on your clinical training at this point in time, you're a second year right now. So what has medical school been like for you these first 2 years?
Yeah, I would say, medical school has been what I expected for the most part. Like anyone who's been through the process knows it's a lot of work, it's a lot of information. Um, but I think, this is, you know, what I think what keeps me going is that I think to myself, all this information that I'm learning, this is going to be foundational to me being able to, not only provide for patients, but also to better inform, how I think about these big, evidence-based medicine or data-driven medicine, as some people call it. How we think about, what exactly, like where exactly is data science most helpful? So in a way, it's kind of similar to my time at Merck, where here we have this large, you know, oftentimes nebulous process with so many moving parts. But the challenge is, can we identify certain points within that process where tweaking something or augmenting it with data or statistics can lead to multiplied downstream effects. So I think medicine is similar in that regard. So so far my curriculum has been a lot of preclinical training, so a lot of classroom based learning. But um, I'm sure like with Sinai, most other medical schools try to integrate hospital based curricula as well. So I've
Mm-hmm.
been gradually over the past 2 years getting more and more patient exposure where for a day or two we're just in the hospital, we're seeing patients, and I'm seeing in a limited way for now, like how the hospital system works, and how patients are getting care, how treatment decisions are being made, um, and that's all been really good, and that's what I'm really looking forward to as well in the next 2 years.
Of course. Yeah. Especially at the back end of all of that didactic work, you're ready to get off of like out of the library and into the wards to kind of see the application of all the things that you've learned throughout this. And I think it's cool too that you're kind of reflecting on the fact that because of your prior experiences, you're kind of viewing medical school through almost a different lens in the sense that maybe a traditional student would look through the textbook and say, okay, this is the answer, this is what I need to know. But you're looking at like, well, why is that the answer? Let's look at the trial and let's understand some of the statistics that went into this. So I think it's just kind of like that extra layer behind the scenes. And the reason I say that is because, like, from a pharmacy perspective, it's the similar way too, where because
Mm,
of my pharmacy training back then, I look at, oh well, why is this medication first line? What's the data behind this
mm,
and stuff. So it's kind of a similar experience, and I think that's
mhm.
probably common for a lot of non-traditional applicants. And so, kind of building out, you're obviously looking forward to your clerkships coming up, but you still have some big milestones ahead of you. So, do you want to tell us a little
Mhm.
bit more about the impending boards that are on your horizon?
Yeah, yeah, sure thing. So right, so step one is on the horizon. That's what's coming up next for me. And yeah, I think a lot of my time now, the truth is that as much as I like doing my data science work and my computational research, that I've been spending pretty much the majority of my time, my additional time at Sinai so far. Um, the truth is that I have to allocate increasingly more time to preparing myself to pass this exam. So even though it's pass fail, and people are saying that, oh, that's so good, like this will be a walk in the park. Um, there's still a lot of content to go through to ensure that I can pass. Um, so yeah, I would say, my outlook for the next couple of months is probably going to be an increasing proportion of my time just spent towards prepping for this, prepping for the exam. So Anki cards, you know, UWorld questions, all that jazz.
For sure. And my class was actually the first one to go through it pass fail. So we were the first like cohort to do that. And it was
Ah,
definitely stressful because like you're saying, the classman above said, "Oh, no one fails. No one fails." Well, that's also because all of them studied for 6 straight months, if not 2 years leading up to this momentous exam. And I
right,
studied 6.5 weeks, and that was not a lot of time. So I was very
right.
stressed. So I would recommend if anyone's listening or for yourself, definitely do more than that.
Noted,
For
noted.
sure, for sure. And so obviously, you're pretty busy with boards and getting kind of preparing for that next stage of medical school process, but you also stay pretty active with your extracurriculars. And I want to kind of transition into talking a little bit about what is the MD plus community and what is like the role that you currently serve in that community.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll first start by saying, so MD plus, so we're a 501(c)(3 um, organization that manages this community. It's a Slack-based community for medical students and early career physicians, basically folks who have gone through medical training, who aspire to add that plus, that additional dimension, whether that be biotech or venture capital, consulting, AI, whatever that field is, but folks who really want to pursue this hybrid career of practicing medicine and also working on this adjacent field. And Yeah, I mean my time with MD Plus really started back in 2020, I think. So the founder, Sherman,
Hmm.
um, happened to be at Sinai, and we also happened to have a couple of mutual friends. So I got connected to him, and my initial foray into MD Plus was actually to serve as their first director of data science, and I helped build out some of MD Plus's back end sort of like data structures. So basically, they were looking for someone, or so initially, like one of the things that I was working on was making sure we could capture our member information in sort of this way that was sustainable and high fidelity. So I built out that platform, but then I started transitioning more into um, uh, this mindset of, okay, how can I like maximize value for people interested in data science or interested in AI, ML applications, and how can I connect them to other people who are maybe a little bit more advanced in their careers in that particular field. And then pretty much from that, I stepped up to co-chair MD Plus alongside Sherman, and then once Sherman rolled off, I was pretty much chairing MD Plus and bringing up people with me. So I've had um, yeah, a couple of co-chairs over the years. So most recently, Clara Sun, she's an M4 at Case Western, or eminent M4 at Case Western. Yeah, really, my time at MD Plus has been one of the one of the best things I would say about my time in medical school. It's just um, such a nice, like refreshing kind of space to be in. When you don't really want to talk about med school anymore. You don't really want to talk about how many Alki cards you did that day. You want to talk about something else. Like you want to talk about the exciting things happening in healthcare innovation. Like what it means to do these other things that don't involve you know knowing what like a alveolus does. And I think yeah, just having that opportunity to lead this organization for the past 3 years has been yeah, just I think a great way for me to spend my time throughout medical school.
Of course. And, kind of building out that principle, I think what you're saying is it's almost like insulates us from experiencing burnout because you are able to kind of detach yourself away from the rigors of medicine or the rigors of like big data and whatnot, or whatever research projects you're working on at the time. So it's like a fun way to kind of meet people, connect with them, share similar ideas. And, there are also like ideas related to like this really unique and like niche down like space that is not talked about or even like, distributed across other medical schools or other medical communities. So I think it's like really cool. And so how big is the community grown at this point in time?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I just what you just said was so good, and that just made me think of two comments. But first to your question, so now we're, yeah, I think a little over 3,000. The number keeps increasing.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain cycles as people find out they're looking for that release too. I think, and we've mainly been a word of mouth community. Like we don't do any advertising or official marketing. But folks, I think there's really something organic here that folks want to just you know text their friends, their classmates about. And yeah, you said a couple of things that made me think of two thoughts. So the first is that I think what I really have come to appreciate about MD Plus, especially now that I'm almost done with preclinicals, is that I think I don't know how other medical students feel, but my experience was that in preclinicals, I think oftentimes the way in which medical education is structured can feel infantilizing. Like, oh, you don't really know anything yet, and for good reason. And we're here to teach you, all these skills. But I think that can be a difficult mental transition for folks to make, especially if they have taken a non-traditional route, especially if they've held leadership positions or been involved with, big scale operations or had just a whole nother graduate degree like yourself. I think that mental transition is can be tough. So my experience with something like MD Plus with a space like this is you get a bunch of like-minded people who all have just high levels of expertise in their particular passion and their particular field, and we allow people to operate at the top of their licenses. We allow people to um, you know basically to sparkle, to really light up when they get so excited about what they love doing and what they love thinking about. And I think it's yeah, I really like your point about, I think it's this is probably, there's probably something here as like a general principle as a way that we can combat burnout, which is perhaps we should encourage more of this um, uh, like adjacent passion finding, so that physicians can feel like they're not just part of this system, that they're not just a cog, but they have so much to contribute. And I'm actually forgetting my second point, but if it comes back to me, then we can revisit that.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And I think you're right in the sense that like medical schools kind of cater a lot of that educational stuff towards a generally speaking younger population who haven't had this non-traditional experience like you're saying. So there are certainly some times where I think they hold your hand through some of the content that I don't necessarily believe I should need that or should be required. I'm a very independent learner myself, and I'm sure you are too. So when I'm told I have to go to mandatory lectures, that doesn't really jar with me too well, in the sense that,
Mhm.
well, I'd rather go work an 8 hour pharmacy shift and then watch the lectures at 2 times speed at 10 p.m. at night. So I think
Mhm.
it's just, having that customization and customizable feature of medical school would be really appreciated. And if we could get that into the more mainstream educational process, I think that would be really interesting to see what the outcomes are.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Awesome. So we're getting towards the end of our interview today, and I think it's time for our famous 3 questions. And these are the same 3 questions that we ask every single individual who comes on the podcast. So, question number one: how do you maintain a work life balance in your demanding profession? And do you have any tips for others who are looking to achieve that same balance?
Yeah, no, that's really great. That's really great because this is something that I'm constantly tinkering with, as the demands of medical school change, every year. Um, but one thing that I found that's helped me a lot. Well, actually, now I just thought of two things. So the first thing I'll say is, I time box a lot of my day, meaning that I'll allocate a certain number of hours to medical school, to my extracurricular activities, to hanging out with my partner and my friends. So basically, like when it hits like say 8 o'clock, I close whatever I'm doing and I say, okay, I'll just leave that. Even if I didn't finish, I'll leave that for another day and I'll, move to something else. And in that way, I think it's kept me sane and that I'm not getting consumed by, one particular task that's just eating up, all my time with no end in sight. Um, so I'll say, yeah, I think for anyone who's maybe looking to tinker as well, I definitely encourage considering time boxing your schedule. And then the other thing I think is yeah, just in line with time boxing, just making time for the people who are really important. So for me, that's my girlfriend. We're currently long distance, but soon we won't be. She's moving to New York, so I think that'll be really great. My family, I haven't lived near my family in over 8 years. So for the first time in a very long time, I'm finally close to home. So I try to see my parents, go home as much as I can. Um, and then in medical school, everyone is busy. My friends who are not in medical school, their work lives are busy, but as much as we can, we try to find times to grab a meal or just hang out, not really doing too much, but just a way to keep connected. So I'd say all those things definitely give me the fuel to keep going.
For sure. It definitely keeps you grounded. And I think it takes a lot of discipline, especially to get through medicine and have all these extracurriculars where they're both kind of pulling at you in different directions and typically in opposite directions for the most part. And so
Mm-hmm.
having like that family structure, having those things that you do value a lot, I think really keeps you in balance when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
the responsibilities that you have to complete. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so for question 2, do you have any last minute recommendations for individuals who are looking to pursue a similar career to your own, whether that be academic, professional, admissions recommendations, and so on?
Yeah, I would say maybe I have like this more philosophical, like hand wavy thing for
Of course.
people who kind of are coming in from this like quantitative realm into medicine. And then, I'll end with a more concrete set of thoughts. So the first is, I think, for those who, come from a strong quantitative background, rigorous statistics, data, my 2 cents would be, that is going to be increasingly valuable, especially as data science and AI hits the mainstream. We're going to need more people like you guys to call out when things are wrong or inappropriately used. And we're going to, I think, really rely on these people who speak, like one word that you used earlier, Nathan, was languages, like to be able to speak these languages of medicine and data fluently so that we essentially, do no harm. I think it's really dangerous when people, are excited about, implementing these technologies into medicine, but if they themselves don't have the necessary rigor and the necessary understanding, we might end up putting algorithms out there, that interface with patients in a bad way. So I think for people coming in with this pathway that I've taken, I think I do see that as kind of our duty, especially in the years to come. But more concretely, I think in terms of going from either working as a data scientist or a researcher or in some other quantitative capacity, um, application wise, I think right now is like probably the best time to really play that up, because medical schools are looking to essentially draft their class to be ready for the demands of modern medicine. They're looking to build the physicians of tomorrow, and it just so happens that the physicians of tomorrow will be dealing with way more data issues, way more machine learning and AI issues than previous generations. I mean, with the advent of things like ChatGPT hitting the mainstream, um, this overwhelming amount of data that we have at our disposal, I think that um, people who are well versed in quantitative methods and well versed in this quantitative space will become more and more valuable. So yeah, I would say for those who are beginning to apply or thinking about applying, this is a really valuable skill set, and people are looking for people for you guys with that skill set.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, because there could certainly, we could do a whole podcast just on like the kind of dangers of like big data and like the interpretation and how like the clinicians need to be trained on that stuff. So that would definitely be something interesting to kind of discuss a little bit further in the future. But yeah, I think you bring up a
Yeah,
lot of really good points there as well. And to kind of close things off with our final question, and this is a big one, what are your personal, professional, or business oriented goals that you would like to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years?
yeah, definitely something I think more and more about with every passing day. So personally, I would like to start a family, settle down, and start that chapter of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think as I alluded to before, family is so important to me. So to start my own, I think that would be a huge personal milestone. And then professionally, I really do see myself. Um, I think given the background that I have and sort of this journey that I've taken, um, my ideal position, let's say 10 years from now, would be a physician scientist, specifically working in the realm of computational genomics. And I think my mission at that point, I hope my mission will be how do we leverage the genomics that's within everyone. How do we leverage our genomics um, to best inform decisions about personalized treatment or personalized medical management? And I think these two spheres. I hope I can integrate them in such a way where um, I would be a practicing clinician. I would understand what it takes to truly care for someone at their most vulnerable, and then also have the scientific and data rigorous background to roll out large scale initiatives so that we could deliver this promise of genomic medicine to everyone who needs it, and in particular the people who are normally excluded from these technologies. And I think ensuring that we have equitable access will be one of my priorities in my career. So, whether that position is localized within a hospital system or outside in the private sector, I think remains to be seen. But I think the core I think functions of that role are something that I'm trying to take steps towards in my early career so far.
That's awesome. A lot of big things coming down the line for sure. So we're going to have to stay tuned because you're going to be changing the world, I think.
Thank you for that.
Too, and I forgot to ask earlier too. So, bonus question for our listeners: what kind of specialty are you looking to pursue at this point? You said you want to be like a data driven physician and whatnot, but like any kind of specialty that you're leaning towards that will kind of facilitate that ultimate outcome.
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm pretty heavily leaning towards cardiology. One, because I think, again, just thinking about scale and sort of my personal goals of how I define impact. I mean, cardiovascular disease still remains the number one cause of morbidity and mortality in the world. So I think that to me was kind of a no brainer. But then two, I think with my background in genomic methods and computational genomics. Cardiology, I think, is probably one of the best fields that I can think of that's primed to have this integration with genomics. There's a lot of theory as to why that is. That I don't think we have time necessarily to go over, but basically the short of it is that cardiovascular disease presents so differently in different people And the natural question is, why does it present differently in different people? And a lot of scientists have pointed to, our genes as kind of the holders of that truth. So I think, there's a lot of exciting research, in the years to come to uncover more insights about our genetic architecture that leads us to have, very distinct presentations of cardiovascular disease.
Alrighty, so we've come to the end of our interview today, and I'd like to thank all of our listeners for the support. If you have any additional questions about the medical school journey, check out my website at www.physicianpharmacist.com. Before we let you go, Lathan, how can our listeners get in touch with you or learn more about you?
Yeah, sure thing. So, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can feel free to send me a DM on LinkedIn. Otherwise, I also have a Twitter, or I guess X account. Feel free to send me a DM through that. And then maybe I could also drop my email. So that's Lathan dot Liu at icahn.mssm.edu.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for being on the show. It really means a lot, and I'm really excited to see where things take you.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Yeah, really, really a pleasure to be here.
Alrighty, take care.
You too.